Happy Friday, beer runners, and welcome to another edition of the iRunOnBeer Friday 5. For this week's episode, I'm actually going to focus on another topic that was recommended by one of my viewers, and that is David Z on YouTube, who's preparing for a big race that's coming up. And we started talking about this issue that a lot of runners have with pre-race anxiety. It's definitely something that I have certainly battled with myself, and I know a lot of other runners face as well. So I just wanted to go through some things that I've learned along the way and little tips and tricks that I use, especially if it's a big race, something intense that I have on the horizon, like Bandera right now for me, that's just occupying a lot of time in my brain, a lot of thought space, and just ways that you can kind of help minimize some of those negative thoughts that might sneak in, minimize that anxiety to make sure that you perform your best on race day. So for this week's episode, we're going to focus on 5 tips and tricks to help you overcome that pre-race anxiety. My first tip is pretty easy and straightforward, and that's just to make sure that you're putting in an adequate amount of practice leading up to the race. So I mean this in a couple of different ways. Obviously, you want to make sure you're trained and prepared and actually have the physical ability to perform at whatever tier you're hoping to perform, complete the actual race that you're hoping to complete. I've talked about this in the past, just with my first half marathon as a perfect example. A lot of anxiety leading up to that race, and a huge part of that anxiety was kind of knowing deep down I hadn't put in the training that I really needed to. I didn't take the training as seriously as I should have, and I was worried about how my legs were going to perform, and ultimately that worry was correct, because as I found out, I had not prepared for the race, and ended up doing some pretty significant damage to my IT band. So just making sure that you are actually putting in the practice that you need to. But another side of that practice is actually practicing at race effort. I think this is huge for help calming those fears leading up to a race, but also during a race, and having confidence in your ability is if you're actually putting in practice time at race effort, practicing speed. That's something that I was not used to until really recently. Probably the end of 2017 was when I really started mixing more speed work into my training runs, but it gives you a lot more confidence leading up into race day and during that race, knowing that you've been there. When you start to feel that burning in your lungs as you start to reach that kind of threshold pace, you're more familiar with that feeling because you've put yourself there in practice and in training, so you become more comfortable in that zone. And I think that's a huge part of confident and strong racing, is knowing that you're able to perform well and maintain speed at that threshold pace, or in that pain cave kind of zone. So not just putting in an adequate amount of practice to get you across the finish line, but also practicing your anticipated paces or speeds to make sure that you are comfortable with the effort that you're hoping to put out. Again, just the more that you can prepare, you're going to see that theme pop up a lot in this video. The more preparation you can put in, the better off you'll be as far as trying to quash some of that anxiety you might feel before the race. Number 2 is something I definitely need to get better at myself. It's something that I try to practice, but definitely don't do nearly as much as I know I should. But that is just to meditate. And it might sound silly, it might sound like it doesn't really mesh with running or hard training, but really the purpose of that, the purpose of working some kind of meditation into your daily routine or daily training, even if it's just something simple, is just practicing quieting some of those negative thoughts, quieting thoughts in general during meditation, but then it will pay off if you're starting to feel anxious about a race, or if you start to hear some of those negative thoughts, or you just start questioning things leading up to a race. A lot of that stress and pressure can build up, and so if you have practiced ahead of time, just being able to quiet those thoughts, quiet your mind, and relax, it will help you, especially if you start to feel those thoughts coming up, or you start to feel anxious, start to feel stressed. You have that ability, you've strengthened that ability to just sit back, close your eyes, focus on your breathing, and just quiet some of those thoughts to help you relax. Again, like I said, this is something I definitely need to work on. I'll talk a little bit more about it in number 3 and when I work on it most, but really just setting aside time to focus on strengthening your mind and helping to overcome some of those negative thoughts that you might have. For me, I do this a lot when I'm running, just focusing on the pattern of my breathing. Running can be a very meditative experience and a great way to relieve some stress, but even just sitting at home, taking a couple minutes to think about nothing at all, clearing the mind and just focusing on something simple like your breathing, or like the feeling of your feet on the floor, something like that. Just picking one solitary thing to focus on and doing your best to push out any thoughts that you might have. There's plenty of apps, and obviously meditation is pretty big in pop culture and news right now, so there's plenty of techniques and online resources to help you, but I just think it's an excellent opportunity, or excellent way, again, just to strengthen your mind, so that if you do start to have any kind of negative influences or negative thoughts creep in, you are much better prepared to help quiet those and push those out, so you can focus on the race and focus on what's most important without letting some of that anxiety creep in. As I said, there's a specific time and a place that I find myself practicing meditation the most, and that leads me right into my 3rd tip for helping to quash pre-race anxiety, and that is just to make sure in the weeks, months, days leading up to a race that you are making sure that you are getting plenty of sleep. You'll see this pop up in a lot of my videos in how you can help yourself prepare, become a better runner, have a better morning routine, etc. A lot of it always comes back to sleep just because of how integral that is just to your whole life. So I say that I practice meditation a lot when I'm sleeping, only because I think, at least for a lot of people and for me specifically, definitely, when I'm laying down to go to sleep, if I have something particularly stressful coming up or something weighing on my mind like a big race, that's when all of a sudden all these thoughts are going to start flooding into my brain when I'm trying to go to sleep. Am I prepared? If it's the night before a race, did I pack X, Y, Z? Did I make sure that I went through my whole checklist? Do I have everything I need? Did I put in the right amount of practice? What if I'm not ready for this, etc.? All these thoughts start bombarding my brain, and so that's when I'll really start to focus on closing my eyes and just focus on my breathing. It helps if you can find some kind of mantra. If you do, keep it to yourself. Just have that as kind of your personal thing that you can go to, that you can focus on, and that just bringing it back to whatever those words, that mantra might be, is a perfect way just to, again, find one solitary thing in your brain to focus on to hopefully help shut out some of those thoughts that might be coming in. And especially at nighttime when you're trying to sleep, to help get you to sleep and help make sure that you're sleeping soundly through the night if you've relieved some of that stress ahead of time. I can't emphasize enough how just important sleep is to training, to your race performance, etc. But even during just training runs or leading up to the race, if you start to fall behind on sleep, that can definitely contribute to higher levels of stress, which in turn contributes to higher levels of anxiety. So just making sure that you're never sacrificing sleep. There's so many things that can get in the way, I think, of good sleep, and so just making sure that that's one of your priorities and considering it a part of training. For me, if I have a lot going on, no matter what's going on in my life, I make sure to think about my day in terms of when I'm scheduling, I have sleep as like an 8-hour block that I need to schedule. So no matter what's going on, when I need to wake up, etc., I'll always make sure to schedule that 8-hour block. And then also usually an hour ahead of time too, an hour before I'm planning to go to sleep, just to start to relax, to help get into that sleep mode, to make sure that when, let's say, 9 o'clock rolls around, which is my normal time that I'm trying to get to sleep, I'm ready, I'm relaxed, good to go, so I can fall asleep, get up at 5 to kick off my next training run. So can't emphasize enough just how integral sleep is to everything that's going on in our life, but especially training, race performance, and again, just helping with that stress relief to hopefully help reduce that anxiety that you might be feeling. For my last 2 tips, I'm going to focus on real tangible things that you can do that I think make an immense difference leading up to race day, just in terms of preparation. And I think that preparation is huge just for, again, just helping to quash some of those fears that you might have, because I think a lot of the fear, stress, anxiety we feel is thinking about the unknown. So as many unknowns as you can eliminate is going to help to reduce that anxiety. Anything that you can do ahead of time to when you're preparing for a race to, again, just reduce the amount of unknown factors there are is going to pay off huge to help with that anxiety. So for number 4, a huge tip that I have is to just have everything packed and prepared in advance. So most importantly, this is going to be the day before a race, or if you're packing for like a race weekend when you're getting ready to leave for a race, but just going through, preparing a checklist ahead of time, going over the checklist several times of everything that you're going to need for your race. This was huge for me for my marathon, my first marathon specifically, when I'd never run that distance before. I made the list. I went through it probably 4 or 5 times the week leading up to the race. When I was packing, went through the list again, laid it all out on the bed so I had it all so I could visualize it. Again, walk through race morning, putting on all my gear and everything just to make sure I had everything in place, again, to quash some of that anxiety, so at least I was going into the weekend and the night before the race knowing I had everything with me. Especially the night before the race, I'll then lay everything out again just to make sure I can visualize I have everything that I need. Sometimes I'll put it out in the order that I'm going to need it in the morning, just to, again, make things as easy as possible, eliminate some of those unknowns, eliminate any unneeded stress, but just making sure you efficiently organize your packing list and preparations the week leading up to the race if you're traveling, and then the day before, especially making sure that you have everything that you need. Again, it seems crazy, it seems a little neurotic, but it's just a little thing that you can do, again, just to make sure that you are confident in everything that you have and just making sure you are as prepared as possible for the race. So something tangible, hopefully that's a little bit easier of a tip to focus on, but just making sure that you are planning and preparing in your mind, and then also packing ahead of time to make sure that you have everything you could possibly need for the race, so that anything that might pop up, weather's going to change, anything like that, you have everything you need so you don't have to worry about some of those unknown factors. Last but not least, tip number 5 actually links back to my number 1 tip, and that just practicing and preparing for the race ahead of time, but my number 5 tip specifically is, if you can, practicing with actual time on the course that you're going to be running on. This is huge, again, just for eliminating unknowns. If you can drive the course if it's a long race, or take a practice run on the course if it's a shorter race, something that's not going to fatigue your legs too much. Just getting time on the actual course itself so that you know what it looks like. I talked earlier about how important it can be to visualize the actual race itself, preparing the morning of and kind of working through the race like based on your specific paces or goals or anything like that, going through it in your mind. And something that's going to help you a ton with that is if you've been there before. I love driving marathon courses before I run them, again, just to make sure I know the elevation, know the turns, know any difficult spots or anything like that, so that I'm aware of them, so I can build that into my pacing plan, which again ties into just the making sure that you are as prepared as you can be for the race. If you can get time on course so you know what to expect on race day, that's going to be huge and one of the best things that you can do to kind of eliminate some of those fears. Even better if it's a shorter race and you can actually run the course, obviously not at race pace because you want to save your legs for that, but let's say you're running a 5K. If you can just get out and do a quick jog around the 5K, something easy, relaxed, comfortable, and just make note of the tough spots, of the elevation, of tight corners, anything that you're going to need to be aware of. It's going to be huge the day before, just going over the race in your head, thinking again about the gear that you're going to need. It ties back to all of the other tips that I went over. Having knowledge of that course is just going to further help you eliminate some of those unknowns and just make sure you are as prepared as you possibly could be for race morning, and is going to do wonders to help reduce some of that pre-race anxiety. So hopefully that helps you. I saved it for last because I know depending on the circumstances of the race, it's not always a possibility or something that you might be able to do, but any chance you get, if you can get some time out on the course, it's going to pay off for you come race day. So you have that experience on the course before you're towing the line on race morning. So there you have it, 5 quick tips that you can hopefully use to help you calm some of those pre-race anxieties, pre-race stress that you might be experiencing. Again, this is something that I feel almost all runners struggle with, especially if you're coming up with, if it's been a while since you've raced, if it's a new distance, a new speed, you're shooting for a big PR. There are so many factors that could cause you to worry or stress a little bit before a race, so the more preparation that you can put in, the better. Something I didn't mention is just putting some time into practice ahead of time, just of things that you can do to relax in the moment. For me, that's always putting on headphones, blocking out the sound around me. I have a playlist of music that's usually pretty good at taking me out of whatever negative space I might be in and just getting me into a more positive and relaxing groove. That's something huge, but just experimenting with things that'll just, again, help you get into that relaxed, calm, cool, collected state is going to pay off huge. So again, hopefully these 5 tips help you out. Some of them take practice. I know meditation is hard. It's not something that we always have time for, but it's going to pay off huge if you can just spend a couple minutes a day practicing it, so when you do start to feel some of that stress or anxiety, you have the ability to push some of those negative thoughts out. So hopefully this was helpful. I hope you had a fantastic week, and I hope that these can help you prepare for the next race that you're getting ready for, especially if you're shooting for a new distance, a new pace, a big PR. The more time, preparation, work that you can put it ahead of time, the better off you're going to be in those, especially days leading up to the race when that stress starts to keep in, but then also going to help keep you relaxed on race day. So congratulations on making it through another week. Happy Friday. I hope you have a phenomenal weekend, and I will see you next week. Cheers.